Jungle.
It's a beautiful bit dicey to understand that if they don't follow the due process of law, then that even if they've done the against and therefore did not sense the due process of law to be able to do what is intended to be done in the act, and that is why Lavanya again, and Dr. Lavanya, I think this is a question which if most stakeholders who are from corporates here may have in their mind. I definitely as an IC member have
గట్టిగా చెప్పండి. ఫ్యూచరల్ పరిస్థితులను బంగారంలోనూ భూమిలోనూ ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేస్తారనుకుంటున్నారు. అది బెస్ట్ ఇన్వెస్ట్మెంట్ కాదండి. ఇలాంటి యంగ్ గర్ల్స్ యంగ్ ఉమెన్ బయట నుంచి పర్ఫార్మ్ చేసినప్పుడు మీరు కొట్టే చప్పట్లు ప్రయత్నిస్తారా? దట్ ఈస్ ద బెస్ట్. Civil and real estate. Miss Purnima Kamble is a partner at Fox Medal and is currently appointed co-chair of South Asia
brought in place to prevent sexual harassment at the work with a specific number of employees, and where that specific number of employees is not met or the unorganized sector has to go to the LCC, which is the local committee.
For this opportunity. Technically speaking, POSH Act, as we have seen the number of hands that have risen, is not so. Is everybody aware of this act? Given that situation, people coming to police, especially under the POSH Act, is very new. Moreover, corporates, very recently I have seen an Instagram reel where a corporate employee was appointed and forming the committee. However, there is a lot of stigma among the women, among the workforce to approach even the ICC. These kinds of myths that their identity will be revealed and there will be a lot.
In fact, that is the real problem that actually is facing the entire corporate world. The large corporates are following the act in intent, in the
more than symbolic compliance and changes are required. Just now to ask people to raise their hands, everyone did. Maybe some people were just waiting, or they didn't know what is sexual harassment and what ma'am says. You see, there is a knowledge gap. Even persons in the corporate they themselves harassment, they sometimes was calling that as sexual harassment. I just want the participants to know that in the POSH Act, the word used is aggrieved woman and respondent. Yani ki it should be there. Ultimate dispute resolution should be encouraged by the government. So I think it's a step backwards by making this suggestion.
So that's very interesting that you brought out these points. Actually, I see. So therefore, women should not be have any fear that they will not be able to prove because they don't have such to prove. The IC is very well trained. IC knows how to look at circumstantial evidence, etc., and come to the conclusion. Now, a woman has to be safe at the workplace, and therefore, there are judges now coming up which are expanding. Even a woman has been included to become a respondent. With that, I will go to the next question to Mr. Chaitanya, who is representing the corporates and is the only male on the panel. He is standing up for us. Yeah? So Chaitanya, please.
Asking that question, and I can understand why I've been chosen for that. While I can understand the premise on which the Act would have been formulated a decade ago or in the making for many, many years before that, if you look at the current situation in terms of the reality of how we are progressing as a society, as corporates, where there's so much focus on DEI, where we're really talking about diversity, inclusion, and equity. From that perspective, I think to be able to keep up with the current times, my personal opinion is that it has to be gender neutral, because it's just more than one gender, so to say. Having said that, at least in most of the corporates, as far as the internal implementation of the Act goes, most of the policies are gender neutral. So when we look at how the large corporates demonstrate the intent of implementing POSH or intent the right policies, we do not see any bias towards any particular gender. Of course, when there are complaints that are received, there are limitations in terms of what the IC can do in terms of their own judicial powers, etc. But notwithstanding those limitations, I think what is more important is for us to create a process through a grievance redressal mechanism or any other inquiry, investigation as is appropriate. But I think in terms of overall inclusivity and setting the right tone of what an organization would stand for in terms of its culture and the right intent of implementing it, I personally believe that gender neutral.
I think this is a very good point that you drove home, and for the corporates, for the people who are representing corporates here, I think your message is very good. That why? See, the important thing is that the minimum statutory compliance should be in place. But law does not say that you cannot go beyond the minimum statutory compliance. So while your IC can continue to give all the compliance for the POSH Act, nothing stops the organization from having a policy in place which also brings within its ambit all, and why do I say all genders? Because we must not forget the LGBT community as well. This is a very, very evolving space. I think the gender is also evolving as time is moving on. So I would say, yes, that's a great point that you have brought out, and I think the corporates will have a nice takeaway from there. Geeta ji, coming to you.
Legal knowledge is very important. Even in spite of giving a clear definition in the Act, saying that somebody with legal knowledge, an NGO working on women issues, and also who has worked on such bad situations with women, those are eligible for the external member to be nominated as external. In spite of a lot of organizations do not understand it fully. So an NGO for them is someone who is working on, let's say, education field, or some other NGO, environment field, or some other NGO not even related to women or children. So such NGOs are being incorporated. Just because there is a word NGO in the Act, the interpretation is any NGO. So what is it we look for from an external member? A subject matter expert, someone who would understand the case and represent it the way it has to be, understand the Act and ensure the process is followed, and also train the internal committee members who are just employees of that organization. Now, if all these things are not met by NGO and just they are being used because they are being, referred to be an NGO, then it is not serving the purpose. I think we need to know in spirit what an NGO should represent in an IC.
Very well said, ma'am. Sorry, you were saying something else.
No, another thing, the fee of the NGO in the Act, it says 250 rupees per sitting. Okay? 250, and I remember talking to a CEO who is in 100 crores company, asking me, Madam, in the Act it says 250 rupees per sitting. So I think that one has to educate themselves. So no matter how much we give, somebody has to understand.
Ma'am, I think you give them this answer that I just said, minimum is in the act, maximum can be anything.
Exactly.
It's the expertise that matters. So, in fact, ma'am, that's a wonderful point you brought out here, the importance of process. And mostly, what ICs don't understand, and sometimes organizations and employers don't understand. The POSH Act is the act which sets out the obligation of the employer to
Whether a criminal case is made or not can be decided at the time of the complaint also to the police. So corporates should not threaten the complainant saying that ఇది జరిగిపోతే మీరు పోలీస్కి వెళ్ళాల్సి వస్తుంది. You shouldn't create that kind of fear in the mind of the complainant. You should give a free chance to think whether she can use the option of going to the police and complaining about this complaint. And also, it is the IC to ensure that no retaliation happens to this woman if she approaches the police. So it is the responsibility of the ICC and it is the responsibility of the employer under the Act to ensure that her workplace is safe and also she gets her kind of grievance redressal.
Otherwise, a lot of doubt because many times we have complainants, not only complainants, IC also saying, first let us look into the matter, we will decide, and if there is something, we will send to the police. That is absolutely incorrect. You are civil or
Talking about a decade of learning, and we're looking at what are the gaps in the act. Like when you spoke about 19H, which you spoke about, it's very interesting because this act, for the first time, was like liability on the employer to take action. It is not for the woman, it is for the. But now this 19H is kind of again very weirdly phrased, sorry to use the word, because it makes the employer liable to initiate action. Yet it goes on to say, if the aggrieved woman desires. Now, more
train and retrain there is everyone, men and women, to be able.
As a representative of the entire corporate world, at least all the law abiding, so to say, the corporates that want to do the right thing, they really implement this law in its true spirit and not just because you have to do it. And there are multiple ways in which a ton of orientation and new hire trainings happen. So they really standing orders of a company are and what the right expected disciplinary methods are and what the culture is at that stage itself. And the second big opportunity that we also use is when someone becomes a manager. They're very young, they're probably 3-4 years into their career and they have this big responsibility of managing people, a very diverse set of people. So that's again a very important intervention or period where the managers need to be trained using case studies, using precedents of how do you handle a real life situation and what are the different options and the resources that are available to them that they can tap into. The next set of cohort that we really focus on is the senior leadership because that's the setting the right tone of the top. In terms of what the organization stands for or what even the employees are expected to do. And not just like a steroid of doing these trainings at the time of their joining, but these are annual refreshers. Everyone has to go through these trainings. They have forms that they need to fill, that they are complying with, and so on and so forth. But I think a more important training, which is actually a very extended training that I would say that we focus on, is the IC training. And that is where a lot of help from external legal counsels like you and everyone in the field, because they're not the expert. That's not their day job. Their day job is whatever their work defines. But they have this additional responsibility, which is a very crucial judicial mandate that they have of being part of the IC. So this very in-depth training that we do for them to be able to discharge their responsibilities. And we also have external members who are experts in the field, like Purnima herself, who bring in that perspective. Because while we have cases far and few between, someone like Purnima and others would have seen cases like a dozen. I think bringing in that external perspective also helps.
Thank you. I've seen that list, when a new employee just sees those terms and conditions on the screen and say, I accept, it doesn't end there. It has to be
Absolutely.
training and retraining. Geeta one question for you and one.
We have professional social workers, we have advocates and lawyers who are actually to be the external members. The training is very important, especially even for the IC members who will be on it. So generally when we do training, and SCSC has done a lot of trainings on course, we covered some 500 corporate employees. We said it is a law that every citizen should know, and especially IC members. So when we train, we first start with the gender sensitivity training and then move on to the act. Because in our country, there are a lot of behaviors which are so normalized, which actually come in the ambit of this act. And it's important for us to first do the cleansing part and then do the training part. And we just do that here, and it's very important to be a professional, to be on the IC as an external.
Very well said.
And also all the panel director, Ms. Purnima Kamble. And thank you, sir. Thank you. Initiators and so many